So when you have a cell phone in your pocket, you're actually getting that phone pressed against in your shirt pocket or your pants pocket is exposing the body to wireless radiation. And by the way, even if you exceed our regulatory limits, they are not protective. They're absolutely outdated and non-protective. So this is imaging done showing the exposures from a phone in a pocket by Claudio Fernandez and colleagues in Brazil, engineers in Brazil. The Cleveland Clinic had issued recommendations saying it's best to keep your cell phone far away from the testes as you can. Now, interestingly, some of those recommendations came down off the website, been a little revamped, but if you take the time to read the papers that Cleveland Clinic fertility experts have published, they talk about the research that has shown effects. And there's been so many studies now recently, systematic reviews that find radiofrequency radiation can harm sperm, several just published last year and this year actually, and also that it can impact reproductive hormones, decreasing testosterone. Here's another image of what we see all the time. So what about tablets? This is imaging that looked at the tablet and head of a child. And this is showing the way the wave moves. It doesn't end right here. This is just showing the propagation pattern. And you can see here the colors representing the intensity of the absorption into the body of a 6-year-old with a tablet in front of their head, close. And yet here's what we'll often see, advertisements. Here's an AT&T advertisement where they are saying, even though you can't be with your kids or grandkids, you can still be part of these important moments like story time with the Caribou app. We need laps, not apps, real books. This is imaging done showing a laptop on the lap and the way the wave is moving off of the device and being absorbed into the body. And you can go on to we actually have on YouTube the scientist Claudio Fernandez talking about the studies that he's done in imaging showing, making the invisible visible, showing the wireless radiation and how it moves through space and moves into our bodies. And yet this is what we see all the time. Our kids, we are not being informed about this radiation, that we should not have these devices in body contact. In fact, the iPhone 13 says in the manual that they are tested again when worn or carried against the torso with a 5mm separation. And yet most people haven't read their manual to know this. Now, they very sneakily say, iPhone is evaluated in positions that simulate uses against the head. But those uses against the head, remember, use the spacer of the ear. And also, of course, the safety standards that we have that all phones, be it Apple or Samsung, use are not protective of our health. And here's a commercial by Apple. I got Hollywood in your pocket. I mean, they have images of these devices in the pockets without informing us. Here's Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 3 5G. And it says in the manual, deep in the manual, body-worn SAR testing has been carried out at a separation distance of 1.5 centimeters. To meet RF exposure guidelines during body-worn operation, the device should be positioned at least this distance away from the body. Here's some yoga pants. Girls are tucking these devices right into their spandex pants, and actually sometimes inside, right? If you don't have a pocket, you just stick it right in the spandex right there, completely unaware. We're told live life on 4G. Now, if you want to find out how to find your cell phone's fine print warning on an Apple iPhone, you go to Settings, General, About, Legal, RF Exposure, and that's a really nice trick to share with your friends. If you're trying to share this information, you can say, hey, let's whip out your phone. Let me show you something. And you find that little regulatory statement, the hidden fine print warnings that state. It should be that they emit radiation, radio frequency radiation, and that they should be a certain distance. Why do they have that warning? You can go to our website. We have a ehtrust.org, and you go to the fine print warnings page, and we have a lot of devices that there are fine print warnings posted. You click on each of these and it'll show you what the fine print warning is. And then we have a link to it so that you can see it online on the Apple website. Most people are unaware. Most people are unaware that video game consoles emit wireless radiation. Here's what the Xbox 360 says in the manual. A separation distance of at least 20 centimeters must be maintained between the antenna of this device and all persons. I went to a friend's house and walked in with my wireless radiation meter and found that their son, the teenage son, had all of these consoles that were right near his bed. They were radiating all the time, even when you're not using them. That's a secret of wireless devices. Most of them radiate all the time, even when you're not using it, when you're not talking on the phone, when you're not using the device, it's always radiating. Here we have the Apple Echo Dot Kids. And it says the device should be installed and operated with a minimum distance of 20 centimeters between the radiator and your body. Marketed just like food, right? Alexa, open the story of Lucky Charms. Alexa, play Freeze Dance. These are marketed to our kids, and no one's informing the parents nor the kids that they emit wireless radiation and that there's supposed to be a distance to meet the outdated standards that we have. Amazon Echo, how many people have one of these in your home? This device should be installed and operated with a minimum distance of 20 centimeters between the radiator and your body, says the manual. Your Apple Watch, which says, when placing Apple Watch near your face, keep at least 10 millimeters of separation to ensure exposure levels remain at or below at tested levels. That's from model A1153. It's always changing, and you can go online to see what the fine print warning is. But again, if you keep that distance, it doesn't mean safety. It's just like with food. We have all of this food, which is on the market, completely legal to be sold. And yet it has, levels of chemicals and pesticides and contaminants, which are not protective, which are too high and harmful. So we don't have federally developed safety standards in the United States for wireless radiation. We have limits. They're sometimes called safety standards, but they're not federal safety standards because actually no U.S. agency developed them. Like for lead, the U.S. EPA is over time. I know they've changed. It used to be you were allowed to consume so much lead or have a certain amount of lead in the blood, and now they've slowly, there's more research, and it needs to be like far more research than should have been needed because we knew a long time ago that lead was harmful to the brain, but the government agencies set these thresholds. But in the US, we actually adopted limits based on industry groups' recommendations. We didn't develop them. US agencies didn't develop them. The EPA was actually developing safety standards, and they were fully defunded in 1996 when the Telecom Act was passed. And we adopted these guidelines. And then they were reaffirmed in 2019. The FCC said, we looked at the 1996 limits for cell phones, cell towers, wireless radiation, and we don't need to change them. They had an inquiry, which is it's when the government agencies open up and they say, we want comments, should we change these limits or not? There were over 10,000 pages of scientific research and evidence placed on that record. Experts, scientists, medical organizations saying, we need to relook at this. The American Academy of Pediatrics said, this needs to be looked at. We need limits that protect children and pregnant women. And the FCC ignored most of that information. So we ended up, our organization, as well as several others, filed against the FCC on this issue. And we actually had a favorable ruling in our case, which I'll talk about. But that's the state of our limits. And